I think it's showtime. I think this is a big moment in Troop history right here. You're all here for it. I'm just gonna this is bring it in, but we're gonna geek out. We've been sort of fighting the tide of just basketball speak that would alienate a regular fan for the history of TrueHoop since 2005. But here we are today. We're just going to embrace it. We're starting a new thing. We're calling Troop Coachspeak. Very excited to have, of course, David Thorpe is here. He's good at the geeky talk, and no better guest than Ryan Pannone. How are you, Ryan?
Doing well. Thank you for having me.
All right. So, Ryan, you are the head coach of the Pelicans G League team, the Birmingham Squadron. You're also one of David's best friends. And you have coached professionally in, this is I think, fairly complete list: Korea, Israel, Slovakia, Germany, China, and the G League. You're also kind of an archivist of digital plays from all over the world. As a sort of to establish your credentials for this new Coachspeak thing, how much time do you spend watching video?
Oh, hours every day, hours and hours. I mean, I tried to also segregate it, to where it's, I watch this much European, this much NBA, this much of players. But I would say 5 to 10 hours, depending on the day. Some days, obviously, a little bit less. But basically, anytime my family and I are driving, which, given how much we move, any place that's over 30 minutes of a drive, my wife drives, I watch film. So, I mean, try to take full advantage. When we watch TV, I cut film. Unless we're watching Ted Lasso, then I can close it. But then that's like growing as a coach too, So
wait, so can you learn that much? Like, I mean, can your brain hold that much basketball?
Oh, I don't know, but I try. I mean, the whole thought process is, I think like coaches are like players. You have some that are extremely gifted and talented, that have a natural eye or their ability to process information quickly, or an eidetic memory. And as my father was once told by his father, some people are real smart and some people aren't, and you just aren't. And for me, I got to outwork those people that are real smart, and try to take as much information in as possible, and try to remember as much as I can. And I also try to categorize everything. So like every clip that I watch goes into one of the following folders. I put it in an offensive skill work folder, defensive skill work folder, offensive concept folder, defensive concept folder, playbook folder, or trash can. And so then I can quickly find and label things. That way, when people are like, hey, will you send me your best hammer actions? Yep, bang, send the folder, and really try to do it that way. And then I also have it defined by NBA or international, because you can't show too much international stuff to the G League players. They like to watch more of the NBA players. So I figured that out my first year when I was showing a bunch of international clips, and they're like, these guys aren't very good. And I'm like, they're actually really good. But it's the understanding.
Where do the best coaching ideas come from these days?
So coaching ideas is a broad term. I think it depends what you want. If you're looking, for me, I think the NBA runs the best end of game sideline out of bounds sets. I think college runs the best baseline out of bounds and zone sets. And I think internationally runs the best half court sets. And then I would also say NBA probably runs the best early offense sets, but that's more so because of the value of analytics within the NBA that hasn't really trickled down to the international or college game, and what the points per possession are on early offensive sets compared to half court sets. But I think internationally has the best half court actions. So
Brian, I don't want to disappoint your dad, but you might be smart.
Well, first of all, to be fair, when he's looking at film, you're trying to mine for gold. You're not tagging every single set of every single play. Aren't you looking for something that's gold, and then you'll grab it and do something?
Looking for something that's specific, something that so within my, I can kind of pull it up, but within my playbook folder, if I'm looking for a playbook, specifically if I'm looking for a play, I may not see a great play, but I may see a great way that an action was defended, or I may see great individual defense or skill work. Like I just pulled actually a great clip, coach, of something we work a lot on, of full speed change direction. Player caught it on the wing, player for CSKA Moscow, quick attack, full speed dribble, counter, change direction, got on the rim. It was really high level. And so if I'm looking for plays, I'm looking for something that is unique and not common, and that inspires an idea. And then I try to break it down into different type of pick and roll action. So pick and roll action, with your 1, with your 2, an inverted pick and roll with the big, stack pick and roll with shallow cut, pick and roll with movement. So I'm trying to define every little action, different types of shooters actions, post ups, layup plays that I think can produce a layup. And so I'm trying to find something that is creative. So not just a basic set, or it could be a basic set with a creative ending to it, or something that happens organically that I think can apply.
Or just
to
a great
team.
skill. Like you'll send me clips of an example that you're watching in Europe or in the NBA that we teach in our gym. And you'll say, hey,
that goes in the skill work folder.
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
So you're maintaining this giant video database, which you're building every day, every time you get in the car. But when you're in a timeout late in the game, like, what do you have from there in your head?
So how I design my timeouts is for the following situations. 1, who is our opponent? How do they defend their actions? So I try to watch the way that they're going to defend off-ball screens, pick and rolls, cuts, post ups, and try to utilize their rules against them to then attack their habits with an ATO. So an example, if I have a mismatch on a post, people always think about attacking switching defense, and to where sometimes you want to provoke switching defense. And so how do I provoke a switch without them realizing what I'm doing? So if your rule is to automatically tight switch a tight curl on a pin down, then I may run an action where we tight curl the pin down automatically to provoke the switch and then attack that switch either through a perimeter player or a post player. Or if you're defending pick and rolls to where you're trying to be aggressive and you're more up to touch, connected to the screener as opposed to back in a drop, then I'm going to look to Henry. Are you still there?
Oh yeah,
we're here.
We lost you for a second, but I think we're here. Can you hear me?
Oh no, did we lose him?
David, you want to monologue for an hour?
Yeah, well, he may have to click off and click back on. So in this particular situation, Ryan would say some of the better coaches in Europe many of the better coaches in Europe are doing this better than what we're seeing in the NBA.
Yeah.
That there's because the NBA is full of the best players in the world, he thinks that they are too quick to just throw the ball to your best player and get out of the way kind of thing, or maybe throw the ball to your best player and run some kind of basic action on the weak side. Ryan feels like they'll trigger what they want. They'll target it, they'll trigger it, and then they'll execute as a 5-man group better than I'm texting right now, Judy, than what the NBA does. And I think I'm to relog on. I think that he gets that. Like, I think he sees that because in Europe they don't have KD or Kyrie to throw the ball to and get out of the way nearly as often. Their best players just aren't as good one-on-one players as the NBA, which is one reason why I think they too often end up staying in Europe when I think they could help an NBA team. Is I think NBA executives on the whole don't appreciate those little things that those guys do, right, and how they would fit great, I think, with an NBA team if they were utilizing those strategies better. But the executives probably are also thinking, well, what that guy does best overseas, like a lot of CSKA Moscow players. You saw Nando De Colo is a really good player for France. He's a big-time player in Europe. He was in the NBA for a while. He's 100% an NBA player, but he's not someone you throw the ball to with 5 seconds on the clock and say, go get a bucket. Just isn't who he is. You put him in 5-on-5 action and he's a genius. Like Joe Ingles isn't all that much different than some of these players in Europe. Although Joe might be a little better as an ISO player, he's a better team player. Patty Mills, same thing. And he said he's trying to log on now, Judy. And I think that our NBA is going to get better at that, though. I think that we have more coaches like Ryan, not less coaches, that will look to what they're doing overseas and get them to, okay, we can do that with our group. One example might be if you have a team that doesn't have so much talent. So don't just try to play classic NBA style strategy with lesser talent. Employ the more strategic stuff. He's coming on now, and I'll get him to talk about this. I think it's the way the NBA can get better, is to do more of what they're doing. He's moving to a different part of his mansion. Ryan, you hear me all right?
Yeah.
Ryan, so I was arguing on your behalf that we've had these conversations over the years where you think specifically what you were just referring to, which is the way you can trigger and target some of those switches or whatever the defense is doing. You think Europeans in general at the highest level do it better than, again, generally speaking, the NBA teams, right?
Yeah. I mean, I think the tactical side of the international game is a little bit higher than the NBA. And obviously there's a few reasons behind that. One is you have more preparation time. You have a longer preseason. You know, in Europe, the preseason is going to be 6 to 8 weeks. And in the NBA, it's shorter. So you have more time to implement more things. And then the season is longer. So people oftentimes think that you play less games, but at the highest level of Europe, like they showed this year, you know, Zalgiris played more games than any NBA team, you know, in the end. You know, the problem is you only have 2 to 3 a week. So you have a little bit more prep time there. And in Europe, every game matters. You know, in the NBA, like the common saying is next game mentality. And in Europe, you know, any loss can get you fired as a coach. And so the way that you're approaching each game is more like the NBA finals, or if you're in college, what the NCAA tournament is, right? Because any loss can be your last. And so the prep behind each loss, or the prep behind each game, is at a more detailed level, you know, because you're going through each set, you're going through what the play calls are, you're expected guys to know the play call, you're expected to know the weak defenders, how you want to target the weak defender. This is a set we put in to attack the weak defender, etc.
When there's like it felt a little bit like if Kevin Durant's on your team, it just doesn't matter that much what you run, right? Like it matters. So this feels a little bit like, you know, where water is scarce, you have to get really good at conserving water, right? And where talent is scarce, you have to get really good at managing talent. Is that fair?
Well, yes and no, because let's also say defensively, first off, I've never coached in the NBA, nor have I ever coached against Kevin Durant, but I would assume that you are preparing how to load and stop Kevin Durant, right? So oftentimes now you can utilize Kevin Durant as a misdirection to create a mismatch on the weak side and attack through that weak side. And even Kevin Durant, the reality is he has spots that he can be put in that make him more efficient and make him better than just playing out of other situations. So I think for me, and what I'm thinking about in our ATOs is going to go into that, you know, and it's going to go into also, let's say I have a guy who's missed a few shots. How do I get him going? Or if I have a guy that hasn't really touched the ball a lot and normally brings defensive intensity and isn't defending because we haven't paid the defensive tax of getting him the ball. So I may run an ATO now just to put him in position, right, to get him going. And even though offensively he may not give us much, but we're missing his defensive intensity. But I think there's a bunch of different ways to utilize and take advantage of your ATOs. And I think how you plan to use them and the reason why you use them is extremely important. You know, for me personally, you know, very rarely do I run an ATO to run an ATO. There's a purpose behind it, whether we're in a scoring drought, they've gone on a 6-8-0 run and I'm running a layup play, something that I think will break the drought. That'll get the team going. Maybe it's to put my best offensive player in position to utilize his individual skill to either create a mismatch or create the optimal spacing for him to isolate and attack. Could be to get a player going or to get a guy a shot, or a guy that is hot, get him another shot.
But I've watched Ryan. I went to go see him play coach a couple of years ago, and we were in like a little coaching locker room before the game, and he was working on his ATOs on the whiteboard, as he should have been doing. I don't know that everyone always does that, but you're not going to drop a good play in clutch time if you've never drawn up before, unless it's a little twist, which is something I used to love to do, Ryan, is if I had a play that I really liked, once I saw you defended it, instead of doing a whole new play the next time, if I thought it'd been long enough in between the play that since I ran maybe the first quarter, just a little tweak, a little twist, expecting what you were going to do. It's just chess, right? You think they're going to do this, add a little tweak to it, and get a little three or a layup or whatever. But you got to practice that stuff first.
Yeah, I think that's the advantage of like what I've found consuming so much film is a lot of teams are going to run common actions, but it's seeing those little twists where it's like, oh yeah, Fenerbahce put this little twist on it that attacked it this way, or the Miami Heat ran it this way and got this little twist out of it. And so I think that's one thing that's an advantage of trying to consume so much film from different countries with coaches with different philosophies and put that in. And, for like drawing up ATO, it's like I practice it and I try to assume who's going to be in an end of game situation, what type of action we're going to run based off how they're going to guard actions. And then I also try to prepare for failure if this guy's out in foul trouble or this guy gets injured. And, I'm practicing how I draw up their initials, because the other thing in the G League, the end of game situations are 30-second timeouts. It's not like the NBA or college or Europe. So you have to be able to get your team over, draw up a play that they can understand and digest and be able to execute within 30 seconds.
I just want to recap what we're saying here. You're saying you practice. You're talking about not a basketball practice with your team there. You're talking about Ryan Pannone on a clipboard, and you're literally practicing how you're going to draw it up. Is that what you're talking about?
Absolutely.
Awesome.
And I'll time myself, to prepare for in the game situation. Like I'll start the timer, because the reality is sometimes you go too fast, right? Because everything in my head makes perfect sense. I'll never forget my first week in Hapoel Jerusalem, the second time that the coach's name was Oded Katash, and brilliant player, brilliant mind. And he's drawing something up on the board and he looks at me. He's like, you see what I'm talking about there, right? And I was like, there's only 3 players on the board. Where are the other 2? And he looked at me and he goes, it's in my head. And as I'm drawing up plays, in a pressure situation, it's all in my head. Like what I'm saying is as clear as day and everyone can understand it. But the reality of it is, how I'm explaining it and how I'm drawing it up, it may not be that clear, especially in 30 seconds. So I try to practice that with 30 seconds, draw it up. Sometimes I'll record what I'm saying, how I'm explaining it, go back, listen to it. Is there a quicker, more clear way to explain what I want? Coach Thorpe always talks about in our player development, speaking in digestible sound bites. And so I'm conscious of that as well. Like, is there one word that describes 2 to where I can better explain this and make a clear picture to our players? And, I try to be as prepared as possible in those situations. So
you use initials, for example, on a whiteboard. In the world we live in now, we call it positionless basketball. How do you do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, which is how normally we've been whiteboarding for years? So Ryan, you use initials, right, to make sure the players know where they're supposed to be.
Oh yeah.
Oh, here we go.
Oh yeah.
If you're listening on audio only, you are about to miss out because it's getting really geeky here.
So it's like if we're gonna get to, let's say we want to get Coach Thorpe a layup, right? So it's gonna be right there. Let's say I have the ball, right, and we're gonna put we'll go Henry right there.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll put our 5, and we'll get to the old Rick Adelman, Kevin Martin play that I try to steal often.
This is such a good play, by the way.
Right, so we've got the back screen there. He's going to go into the post up, not too deep. We want to dribble over, create the elbow entry. As that happens, Coach Thorpe, who's our go-to scorer shooter, is going to start creeping in, not too fast because we don't want his defense defender to be disattached. We want him to be connected to him. So as we do that, our post player is now going to be calling for the ball, posting up, punching in as a misdirection. Our 4 is going to flare me. Coach Thorpe is going to tight curl it, and we're going to look to pass fake high, bounce pass low, feed him on the rim for a layup. You know, so the old Kevin Martin special that
Rick Adelman ran that. Rick ran that all the time.
Yeah, I got it like 5 or 6 times in the bubble.
Oh, did you really?
And yeah, want to watch video?
No,
Ryan, that whole play is bullshit because I have played pickup basketball with David Thorpe, and he brought us in as a team before the first game, and we were all thinking we're about to get magic. This is like he's been training his whole life. We're about to learn things about the game that we've never imagined. And you know what he had to say to us? He's like, guys, I can't move. I got a fucked up shoulder. I can't move my arms above my head. I can't run. You're going to have to do everything. Something like that.
I don't remember the legs part, but I know my shoulders were messed up.
Honesty is the best policy. He knew who he was and he stuck to his role. He was very clear. He's not going to provide any value, and you'll have to carry it.
Adam, just to finish the point though, Adelman would run that play, but he would come up with different ways to get the pinch post entry. Like I remember we ran it one time for Houston with Kyle Lowry at the as the passer. He did it once with Battier as a passer. Like that's part of this game too. Is it might be the same play with completely different players, different positions. That's the same action though.
So I made a stupid mistake, and I mean that's part of it in the bubble. So like I always try to have a right-handed passer on the left elbow to make that pass, and I put a left-handed passer on the elbow out of a timeout, and they got a deflection. And the reality of it was, like I showed it the next day in film, I didn't put them in the best position possible to succeed because I put a left-handed passer on the wrong elbow in the way that I ran the play. And so that is what I don't want to happen in an end-of-game situation. And that's why I try to be so prepared. Who's making the pass? Where's it coming from? What hand is he? Who's the shooter? What type of footwork does he want off the screen? What way do they want to come for the lob? Because some guys prefer to jump one direction over the other. And so, I ask our players a lot of these questions. I also break down all their film. And then as I'm creating, especially in the game situations and plays that I want to run, I'm drawing it up under the pressure. What side of the floor are we taking out? What direction is he going for the lob? What direction is he coming off of the screen? Who's inbounding the ball? And every possible outcome to put our players in the best position possible to be successful. And then you have to get lucky. That's the reality.
But you're preparing for the luck, though. I don't want to gloss over that point, Henry. You better know your personnel. You better know this guy can't make that pass. And it's important to say that because I promise you, we're watching games all the time and thinking, why did the coach have that player in that position? He can't make that play. It's just like the simple way to look at it would be running a great play to shoot a 3 by a guy that can't shoot threes. It's more nuanced regarding who can dribble the ball to that part of the court, who can set that screen without maybe getting called an illegal screen, who can deliver that pass, who can catch that pass. These are things, Ryan said this already. I don't coach the players, the pro guys that I train, I don't coach them, but I will always ask them, which side of the court would you rather catch the ball on? Do you want to go off your left foot? Do you want to go off your right foot? What angles do you like to take to shoot the 3? And then I make them state what they like best. Very often they haven't thought of it. They're not really sure which one they like best. So let's figure that out. And then hopefully your coach will figure it out. If you're good enough, you can tell your coach. Young rookies aren't going to tell their coach anything. Older guys might say, Coach, I like it best when we do this. The best coaches will ask them, how do I best utilize you? That's what Ryan's referring to there.
Yeah. And I try very hard. And, Coach, I figured it out at a young age. No one else will know who this player is. When I had Chris Perez in inbound the ball. He kept turning it over. He's like the all-time leading scorer in the history of Pinellas
And a
County.
great ball handler.
And great score. And sometimes,
pass.
right, you have your scorer inbound the ball, and
pass.
that way people are often forgetting about him. And he kept throwing it to the other team. And like, why do I keep having him inbound the ball? So I quickly made a rule. I was like, he can never inbound the ball in any situation under any time.
Yeah.
And when he went to college, I remember telling his college coach, I was like, whatever you do, just don't let him inbound the ball. And I remember watching the game and he's inbounding the ball and he turned it over. I was like, man,
Told you.
I love
But-
that guy.
no, I mean, you have to prepare because I mean, at the end of the day, we have to put our players in the best position possible. And as we all know, the reality of points per possession and end of game situations are low. But if we can impact it very marginally, then that can be the difference between winning and losing. And I never want a player to walk out of a situation not feeling I was prepared and not feeling I didn't do everything within my control. And it's the same thing. We expect that of players, right? We want them to work on what they are going to be doing in crunch time, in the game situation. And obviously, if you've prepared for it, whether or not you make or miss it, you've done your part. You've put the effort in, you've put the intention in. And if I don't do that as a coach, then I'm failing my players.
Ryan, will you make sure after this is done, and we tweet out something about this podcast, and maybe we'll include what you just drew up. Will you retweet with one of your plays? I don't care if it's a play from the NBA. It can be from one of your team, but one of your bubble games. To see that, because for anyone that listened to it and you get a chance to really see it, it'd be good to see it actually in action. But all those plays that you see running games started off on a whiteboard somewhere. Obviously, I'm not talking about the Jazz things that happen, but they're just executing a strategy and then reading and reacting to it.
And there's so much, what I found in my first year, it was interesting because I tried to utilize a stop it, start it, keep it component in building our culture that obviously in the business world is a little bit more common. First time I ever heard of it was from Aaron Fern, who's one of the best coaches I've been around. And so basically you're going amongst your staff and your players and you're saying, what are some behaviors that I need to keep doing? What are some behaviors that I need to stop doing? What are some behaviors I need to start doing? And one of the players communicated to me that when I spin the board to draw the second part of the play, like he can't take it, like he loses it because, normally I will, to save time, draw a play this way. And then I just turn the board and I redraw where the play left off. And he's like, when you spin the board, I lose focus. I can't take it. And so then I had to change the way that I drew up plays to which I was always wondering, like, why is he messing it up every time? He didn't feel comfortable enough to tell me in an environment in front of his peers or in front of myself, and to where I put him in a position where I was vulnerable. Like, what do I need to get better at? And he's like, Coach, I just can't remember. And so then I had to go home and start training, drawing up plays, erasing it, and keeping it on the same side. Because for years I'd been practicing spinning the board, so that was something really interesting I learned in my first year of like, what is the best way my players take it off the board? And
it's very Ted Lasso of you.
That's Ted Lasso.
Brian, you mentioned about the difference in the time you have. Henry for years has been championing the idea of making these games more entertaining, more delightful for the viewer, for the longevity of the sport you and I use as a profession. And so this is one of the ways would be how they do it in Europe compared to the NBA. You've coached both in the G League here and of course in Europe a lot. What do you prefer? Not from a fan point of view, from a coaching point of view, do you like the less time, got to be more concise, or do you wish you had more time?
I wish I had more time. I think the NBA and the game timeouts like really long, 2.5 minutes. I mean, you don't need.
Not in the rule book, Ryan.
What is
in the rule book? It's 90 seconds, but it goes. You put a clock on it, it's almost 3 minutes. But
exactly. And so in Europe, it's 90 seconds, and it's more start stop. And in the G League now, they are on it. Like, you will get a delay a game warning if your team is not out. And, the media timeouts are 90 seconds, but the end of game is 30.
Wait, Ryan, so let me ask you this.
And
So the whistle sounds, you call timeout, and then when do they start the clock? Like right then?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Whoa.
Like the first game, our players are walking into the timeout, because it's not college anymore. And like, by the time they got over there, I was like I was halfway through the play, and I was like, what the, and so then I had to start having them like running and like tell them like, look, I'm not trying to make it like college. It's not like a power thing where you guys got to sprint in. It's like, we only have 30 seconds. And so then it started to change which side of the floor I want in the game, because if you're the visiting team, you can choose that. And so now I want that closer to me to save the 7 seconds when guys are walking over. I also learned like I had to start drawing up the play before then. So like, as the game is going in the last minute and a half, I have to anticipate what the end of game situation is going to be. And so let's say like during a free throw, I'll draw up if we need a 2 on one side and if we need a 3 on another. And then as it comes down to that end of game situation, I'll erase one of them and take the play from
Is
there.
a minute enough? Would a minute do?
I mean, after doing it for 30 seconds, a minute would be great. It's no, I mean, because it's all what you're used to. So coming from Europe, I went to the G League, and we had like a 9-day preseason. And my first year in the entire G League, I was like, we don't have a long enough preseason. We don't have enough time for practice. We don't have enough time to put anything in, because in Europe, I'm used to 6 to 8 weeks. And then, you're getting 3 to 4 days of practice a week. You also, there's no belief in managing the players and load management. You just practice. And then when I went to the bubble, we had 4 days and we had 15 games in 25 days. And so I had to rethink before we went to the bubble, how do I best get our players to remember our sets, to remember our plays, to play the style of play I want in the G League, which is different from everyone else, because I want to play with more of a European style. And how do I best teach them what I want and get them to execute it? And so then now after the bubble, I was counting the days for our preseason this year. I was like, we have so much time. We have so much time for activities. It's like, so I mean, when you go from like, if I would have gotten a minute timeout to begin with, I'd been like, this is not long enough. But it's like everything. If you go from 30 seconds to a minute, you're like, I don't know what to do with the other 20 seconds.
So many activities. Brothers. Ryan and I can literally have a conversation where all we're doing is quoting movies. So we'll spare you that time. But that was one of
Maybe that's a different episode. Maybe we'll do a whole episode of just quote movies.
Ryan, so speaking of time, so you finished the G League. You had this summer, since you're not getting paid to coach in the summer, but we are targeting coaches in this podcast. Tell us what you've done this summer as a coach, both in your duties with the Pelicans as well as in your career interest to try to be a better basketball coach.
So a few things I've done in terms of trying to become a better basketball coach is studying as much as I can, which is something I try to do year round. I think what makes me different compared to most people that take the normal G League NBA path is my background, which I think allows me to see the game differently, not necessarily better. I just view the game in a different lens from the player development side of working, with Coach Thorpe growing up. I think what separates him is his eye for detail. And then also learning in Europe how they play the game, why they play the game this way, what their emphasis are, what their teaching points are, and trying to blend that into my own philosophy and beliefs from a team component. And so continuing to study and not lose touch of what's happening internationally, I think it's been a big focus of mine. But then also studying how the brain works, because at the end of the day, I spent all this time watching X's and O's and plays. And so now I've tried to spend more time learning how to best get our players to execute what I want. So learning, how do I construct practice, block practice versus structured practice versus messy learning? How do I get them to remember plays better? How do I get them to remember concepts better, or remember what we want to do from a philosophical standpoint? And spending time studying more of that, and then continuing to work and grow in different situations, because we don't really know what our G League team is going to look like. Like, we don't know what it'll look like until a week before training camp. And so now continuing to adapt and marry the philosophies of what I love about the international game and the NBA game on how to best execute the style of play that I want, that also makes sense in terms of efficiency analytically. Because my approach is analytically driven, which is different than Europe. Europe is not so analytically driven. If you watch, they're going to play at a slower pace, take a bunch of mid-range shots, but it's also not to the extreme where all mid-range shots are bad, or all post-ups are bad.
Well, they're not as focused analytically because they don't have the resources devoted to creating those analytics. They just don't have the numbers. They don't have second spectrum. They don't have, I mean, we have, how many websites, Henry, can you and I go to and get such incredible breakdowns? Today, I was studying the Sixers lineups, wondering what's going to happen if Ben Simmons is traded. How does Doc do his rotation now? 5-man lineups. I did 5-man, 2-man, and 3-man lineups this morning for the Sixers. Just wondering how often guys play together, and they have a new team coming in. They don't have any of that on the European sites that I've seen, like the Euro.
No, it's far behind, and obviously more and more teams are beginning to invest in it individually, but obviously in terms of the easy access for data tracking is behind. And so, for me, I spent a lot in the pandemic. Like I hear a lot of coaches saying it's like over information, they over consume information. And I'm like the opposite, to where it's like, I want more and more information, because then I can figure out what I like from each clinic that I watch, each practice that I like, and how to then, take what I want from that best will suit, one, my beliefs, my philosophy, and then two, figuring out how to get my players to better execute it. Because oftentimes as coaches, we have great ideas that, one, we don't really know the most efficient way to teach it, and two, we don't teach it in a format that our players can best learn it. And so that's an area I really want to continue to improve on. But I've tried to go to different practices, did a clinic in Bologna, went over to try to watch the different national team practices when I was in Europe, studying at Summer League, studying different coaches at Summer League, studying their coaching demeanor, their mannerisms, how they interact with their players, what they're like in a timeout, how they communicate with their staff, how they communicate with their players.
Who's the best with demeanor? Who's the best?
Coach Willie Green is at the elite of the elite. I mean, his coaching demeanor, his patience, his calmness, his positivity is at the high of highs. And I spent a lot of our time at Summer League, one, watching and evaluating some of the players that'll be with us in the G League and trying to figure out how do I best put them in position to be successful, in my opinion, within the system that we will run with Coach Green. But then two, studying him. Like, I spent a lot of time, like, as the game is going on, watching him. How does he react? What are his mannerisms? What is his demeanor after mistakes, after positive things, when we draw up a play and they don't execute it? You know, how does he react to it? How does he interact when a player forgets something or may have a selfish moment? Not necessarily that they're a selfish player, how does he handle that? And I would say how calm he was, his patience with the players, his demeanor took us in a lot of close games and opened up the game. You know, like I would say, like, if he would have, which oftentimes we do as coaches, right? We begin to already take a stressful environment, which is number one, playing any sport for any players that actually love the game. But two, in summer league, a lot of guys are fighting for jobs. You know, whether it's internationally, it's the G League, it's the NBA, the stress that they are putting on themselves and the stress they are receiving maybe from family members, loved ones, agents, other coaches is extremely high. And I think oftentimes as coaches, we can take an extremely stressful environment and put more stress on the players. And watching the way that he interacted was amazing. And I spent so much time even watching the way that he communicated with players, right? There's obviously lots of studies done about the power of touch. And when you're communicating with someone, putting your hand on their shoulder, putting your hand on their back, embracing them was amazing. And it's something that, I feel naturally I do a good job at, but I also become, especially in my first year, that was something else I learned in the start it, stop it, keep it, things that I was doing that I didn't even realize. So like when a player would mess up a play off the board, I would toss the board to the side, or I'd have the timeout piece of paper and I'd crumple it and toss it. And one of the players said, when I see you do that, it frustrates. I know that you're frustrated. I know that we made a mistake. And then now the frustration is compounding. And while I know that as a coach, right, like if I were to see someone else do that, I'd be like, why is he doing that? But I didn't realize I was doing it until he said it. And so then I had to communicate with our associate head coach, hey, after a timeout, if they mess something up, make sure if you see me start to do something, stop me, correct me. If I do it, make sure you tell me, because I didn't want to apologize for it because it's a behavior I'm trying to become more structured in. And then I had to figure out how to take that frustration and turn it into something that's positive. Because for me as a coach, I care about what wins, like what helps our players become better, what helps our team win. And if I'm doing something that doesn't impact winning, then there's no need for it. And tossing the board doesn't help our team win. Crumpling up a piece of paper doesn't help our team win. And that's my approach in what we do in practice and what I want out of our players and how I hold them accountable. Does it impact winning or not impact winning? And that's how I try to define a lot of things. And I had to take a look at myself of what was my demeanor in certain situations. I handled mistakes well. Like if a guy turned the ball over, like we have kind of two rules. If you make a mistake, or if you, is this a PG show?
Oh, no, absolutely.
If I'm on the show, you could just assume, Ryan.
So if we fuck up, I want you to fuck up with effort and unselfishness, right? If you make a mistake and it's with effort or unselfishness and what your intent was, it's okay. So our guys would turn the ball over and I'd clap and be positive. Hey, don't worry about it. Next time, make the play. Good idea. But I didn't realize out of timeouts, my coaching demeanor and body language was negative, which was putting more frustration on the players. And so I then had to learn. I stopped throwing the board, crumpling a piece of paper, and I just started clenching my fists. And then I was able to go to that to clapping. It was a slow progression to where I was able to do that. And watching Coach Green, guys would make a mistake and there is zero. There's no hand clenching. There's no tightening of his body. There's no negative reaction to what's happening on the play. And it's something that's so subtle, but I think our players are extremely good at recognizing body language and how that implements their performance is extremely important. And man, just watching him, I could only think, I was like, I've improved, but I've got to be better. like this is the standard of how he's reacting in these situations.
So just to follow up on that, when you talk about you finally get the clapping, I was going to say, I saw you the first time you coached in Florida, well, coached in Lakeland, which is not far from where we live, but that's the Magic team. I went to your game. Your team was bad. This was 2 seasons ago. They were bad. They had a couple good players, don't get me wrong. I think one of them was hurt. Maybe Jalen Adams was hurt, he didn't play. And you clapped a lot. And after the game, you called me and like apologized for the way the team played because you wanted your team to play well for me, whatever. And I, first thing I said as coach, I was just so proud. I was so proud of you. I even said something to the reporter that was next to me. There was one guy that covered the game. And I said, you won't pay attention to this, but what that guy's doing is saving those guys' careers because they're messing up all over the place. And all he's doing is clapping and breathing spirit into them. Now, I also know you'll coach those guys up the next day. You'll show them film, you walk up their mistakes, but yelling and screaming would not have done anything but make things worse. And so I say that because this last season, you had Najee Marshall on your team and a very talented player, I think from Xavier. Where's he from? Yeah, Xavier. Very talented player. I think he's a two-way guy for you last season. And you said to me, if I do my job, he's going to get a contract. He's a good player. I don't want to lose him. And so if you could walk us, Najee Marshall was one of the more impressive, in a sense, second-year players in Summer League. And I think he has a guaranteed deal, at least for 1 year. I think you said he's got a 3-year deal. Maybe the first year is fully guaranteed. Maybe not. If you know the contract, tell it. But walk us through that process of Najee and how you were one of the many coaches probably helping him get to being a guy that I think is going to be an important player next to Zion Williamson. Like everyone's going to know his name, Ryan, because he's a key player on your team playing with Zion.
He's a great story, going from being a two-way player. And I mean, one thing, I think if you ever had watched Najee play in college, he played extremely hard, was a really good creator, an unselfish player. And obviously our scouts did a terrific job evaluating him and getting him on a two-way contract. And we had him in the bubble, and I think our coaching staff did a really good job with him. And first thing, I think it comes to what we evaluate in players. And, for me, do they love the game? Do they have a good heart? Because one, if they love the game, you can push them in a lot of directions because they truly love basketball. And two, if they have a good heart, you can help guide them in some ways that they may need help. And Najee loves basketball. He loves to play. I mean, you put him on the floor. I mean, man, you can just see the joy in his eyes from playing the game. And it's really exciting to see. And like a lot of young players, he needed to continue to grow in areas and learn how to become a professional and what the approach was, what his intent was. And, I couldn't sit there at Summer League and not because of our coaching staff, to watch this young man compete every possession, how good he plays, how positive he was, the ownership he took defensively, and the way he's fighting for, even in the last game, in the last game that we played really well. We were up by quite a bit. And most people in Vegas, coaches, that like it's the last day, they're tired. They're like, all right, let's get this over with. Let's go home. Yep. He's on the bench. I mean, going crazy for his teammates. I mean, just cheering them on, hyping them up, play after play. And, I couldn't sit there but watch him and just think like, he's got it, and our associate head coach, TJ Saint, really evaluated from college and loved him. And our coaching staff did a really good job. But it was being able to, in his first game, he came in, he took a step back mid-range shot with 15 seconds on the clock. And I took him out and I was like, Najee, we don't take those shots here. Those are for BI and Zion. And, a lot of players, they would have reacted and been like, in a negative way.
Yeah.
And he looked at me and goes, I got you, coach. I got you. Sad. I put him back in 30 seconds later and just kept on playing. And, he made, like most players, made more mistakes. The game of basketball is a mistake-filled game throughout the bubble. But every time you would hold him accountable, and I think it's super important for coaches, right? People often mistake accountability with you have to be an a-hole, right? Like you have to then say something really witty and funny that insults and gets the player. And all you have to do is tell them the truth and be honest and give them your opinion. And most guys are going to react if they have a good heart positively. And every time, with Najee that we were able to coach him up, every time I got you, coach. I got you. Go back in and play hard and compete. And the thing that I love about him was his ability to create and be unselfish. And, I think his best game at Summer League was his worst shooting performance. Because to me, you have a talent is, can you impact winning and dominate a game without scoring? Because so many people put all the value on scoring. And I mean, he was locking up 1 through 4, creating for others, rebounding, and almost had a triple double. And I think it was like 2 for 10 or something.
That's a Drew Holiday story in the postseason. I'm sure Gerard's going to have an amazing question for you, but while we're bringing him on, Devin wants to know, like, favorite players you've ever coached from Europe or here, player development, G League, junior college. I know all your high school guys. And guys, the high school players Ryan coached, I helped all of them in the summer. They always welcome to train with me. They love him like a dad. But who are some guys you would say at the pro level?
Pro level, on the team side, Jared Utoff. He is, I think he had a few cups of coffee in the NBA. And I think as a coach, because I try this myself, because if I want to make the NBA, I have to do everything possible to put myself in position to make it. And whether or not I make it or not doesn't define who I am as a coach, and it doesn't define who I am as a person. It won't define my success. But if someone were to come to me and say, hey, you were really talented as a coach, but you didn't make it because you didn't work hard enough, you weren't prepared, you didn't care enough, your appearance wasn't what it wants in the NBA, I would die inside. Yeah. And for Jared Utoff, the guy does everything imaginable to be successful and put himself within position, and he just needs a break. So for one, he was walking around the bubble with, like, at night with the blue light shades on, so that doesn't impact his sleep. Awesome. And was eating carrots and drinking shots of olive oil, so he says. And he's just pouring he's pouring olive oil out the bottle into a shot glass and throwing it back. And
wait, should we be doing that? Are we missing out on this olive oil thing?
He's a pretty healthy guy.
Jared is he is the epitome of professional to the extreme. He's got a 6-hour routine in his off day. So I'd have to say him, Amari Stoudemire, and not for the reason people would think, not because he was one of the most fantastic players ever, but his love and passion for the game. He went to Jerusalem, played in Jerusalem for no money, and wanted to be coached. The team had sent me down there for 2 weeks to make sure he was in shape. And his approach and professionalism to the game is at the highest levels. And then too, he wanted to be coach. He wanted post-game film. He wanted longer scouting reports. We'd be in shoot around, and he, starting out, didn't play in the Israeli league. So we'd have an Israeli league game shoot around. It's like, one, he could be like, yeah, I'm not even going to come because he's not playing. Not only did he come, he's going harder than everyone else in shoot around, and he's and he makes it fun. He starts yelling. He's like, you got the big dog down here. You got the big dog. Got to feed the big dog. and like he's not even playing, but like he's getting guys going and he's yelling at guys for not going hard enough and not taking it serious enough. And I think as a coach, right, you want to surround yourself with people that just have a high care factor. And he was not only an incredibly talented player, one, the guy just loves the game of basketball more than any player I think I've been around. Two, the approach that he has with how old he was, how good he was fantastic. The guy just cares and loves the game.
All right, let's get to Gerard's question because we only have a few more minutes. Hey, Gerard.
Hey, Coach, and Ryan, this is great. Thank you. I was thinking about something that I always wonder about. What do you do, or how do you think about giving players freedom inside your structure, right? Like there's this idea of, and Coach Thorpe, you always talk about this, the artist and the scientist, right? Some people, it's very like, okay, tactical, 1, 2, 3, 4, and I get to 10. Some people will get to 10, but it ain't going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, right? Like, how do you think about players like that, and what has been your experience coaching players like that?
One, creating an environment so they understand why we have the structure. So if we have a great, I'd bring it back to the old whiteboard. If we have a great isolation board, like for me, spacing is more important than plays and getting guys to understand spacing. And so if I have a really good scorer here, right, and I have let's just say your 2 here and your 3 here, the reality is he's got nowhere to go, right? But now if I can take him and move him here and move him here, whereas he attacks, cut and shift the defense, right, it's going to open up the gaps that maximize their talent. And so I think, one, I want them to understand why I want the structure, because if we can think of spacing as a living organism, right, it's organic, it's no longer static, it's almost dynamic, that if we can teach guys to space and respace to provide the maximum amount of space for them to be able to attack and utilize their talent, 1, 2, utilizing our sets and play calls to maximize their talent. If we have a guy that's a great ISO player, like we had Jalen Adams, I have no problem with him isolating to attack one-on-one. It's how do we get to the isolation? So if we come down and 4 guys are standing there and he just beats his guy one-on-one and he scores, right? Yes, he's going to feel great. He will have scored, but how does that impact the performance of the 4 other players? Because reality is every player wants to feel involved. So we will create situations with movement before the one-on-one environment, right? And so now 3, 4 players have touched the ball. And then now off that movement, the defense is shifting. We've maximized the spacing. We may have provoked a switch to put a weaker defender on him. Now we put him in position to utilize his talent, and then getting them to buy into understanding attacking to score versus attacking to create. And so I think most players are taught you want to attack to score, and attacking to score is of selfish intent. Attacking to create, one of the options of creation is scoring. The other option is creating for your teammates. So now it's teaching them we're utilizing your skill and your talent. And Coach Thorpe had a great saying that I stole from him, right? Like, we're not running this play for you to shoot. We're not running this play for you to score. We're running this play for our team to score. And so now as you attack and your individual talent is going to create 2 defenders on the ball, now being able to make that play and create a wide open corner 3 for your teammate brings huge value to our team and puts us in position to win.
I was quoting Coach Pop, by the way.
There's so much stealing.
Yeah.
It's like
I'm glad Ryan thought it was me, but it was Coach Pop. Yeah, talking about Kawhi Leonard. Yeah.
I mean, you just cite the person you heard it from.
Yeah, it's fair. We have like 30 seconds left. I just have got to ask you, when you talked about Willie Green's skill set and keeping emotionally kind of perfect, that's Ted Lasso stuff, right? This is what I feel like I'm watching when I see the show Ted Lasso. Agreed?
Oh yeah, he's at the height. He is a man of grace, and I say that because I can't say I've ever described a coach with grace. It's not that coaches don't have it. I've just never described it. Coach Green is a man of grace. The grace that he gives his players, the grace that he gives his staff, and the grace that he showed me. He showed me grace in a situation that most coaches would not have and most people would not have, and he didn't have to.
So Judy's not going to be graceful if we go overtime.
We're an hour show, not 61.
It's hard. Coach, thank you very much. Gerard, Judy, David, we will see you guys again on Friday.
Thanks, guys.